Welcome back. Our guest is another special treat for me, so we'll start with our standard questions. Who you, what's due, and why?
I am Mike Drucker. I am a comedian who is also the co-head writer and co-executive producer of Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, and I also do video game writing. And why I do those things is because it's a nice way to make a living.
Could you ever imagine yourself doing anything else?
I worked at Nintendo for a while doing a somewhat similar job to this, and I could imagine doing that forever. But outside of like video games or TV, I'm not sure what I would probably be like an English teacher or an IT guy in South Florida.
Wait, so for a while, were you ever the subject of, well, my uncle works at Nintendo and they're gonna get you kicked off of eShop?
I was, but I was never that close with my family, so it was always like
No.
It was never my uncle. I don't have any like nieces or nephews, but I definitely had cousins that are like, he works at Nintendo, and I'd be like, yeah, I can send you a shirt, I guess. Like, I'm not gonna tell you any secrets.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's get back on track. Sure. Is there anything you have coming out soon, or anything you're doing soon that you want to tell our audience about?
Sure. Speaking of video games, I wrote an entire book on one video game called Silent Hill 2. It is part of a series of books called Boss Fight Books. People watching are probably more familiar with the 33 1/3 books about individual music albums. This is the same thing, but for video games, and I wrote one.
All right. So these books are like talking about the video games as a whole, or
like the history of it, sort of an analysis of it, why it works, how it works. Each author takes a different tack. Like mine is much more history and analysis of it, and some people do like a full book that's just their personal experience around it, or how like one guy wrote a book about a Japanese game and how it helped him acclimate to Japan. But mine's a little more English majory.
So I'm guessing you're able to dissect all the hidden meanings of the things that are coming out of the darkness trying to kill you inside of Hill too.
It is the first time I've used my master's in lit, and I am happy that I finally got to use that $40,000 albatross around my neck.
And probably also be a freaking playground for a psychology major as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So aside from being writers, performers, and wicked good looking, we also have both done The Dork Forest with Jackie Cation.
Yeah.
You did yours on horror games.
I did, yeah.
So what is it about horror games that overall that you find appealing?
I think that, I like horror movies, but what really drives me about horror games is the interactivity of them, which sounds obvious, but in a horror movie, it's out of your control. And there's a scariness to that of don't go in there. Oh no, they're going in there. But with horror games, it is within your control. So there, instead of it saying don't go in there, it's this feeling of, oh no, I have to go in there. And to me, that's a much more compelling feeling of that like sense of like, I don't want to do this thing that I know I have to do in the game. So I can either stop playing or do this thing I don't want to do. And horror games are great for that. And I just feel like when they're immersive and when they're good, they're some of like the most real emotional experiences you can get in games.
Yeah, like for a movie like let's say the Saw series, where it's like half the time you're spending your time yelling at the TV or movie screen, being like, "Why would you do that?
Why? Do that? Yeah."
And then horror games just like, "Oh, if you're so smart, you do it."
Right, exactly. And then you're like, "Why did I do that?"
Would you say that you get a richer experience about third-person horror games or first-person horror games, like the difference between Silent Hill or Outlast?
It's a little less about the exact perspective, third versus first, as much as I prefer sort of more psychological, sad story-based horror than like blow 'em up action horror.
Yeah,
I think that's like where in my head the dividing line is like games like the middle Resident Evil games, like basically 4 through 6, games like that are a little less interesting to me than necessarily games like Amnesia, where you're sort of like, you have no weapons and you just have to run.
Yeah. Or like Outlast, or
Outlast,
like
exactly.
the first couple hours of Resident Evil 7.
Exactly. Which is great in VR. Resident Evil 7 in PSVR was terrifying.
You're a braver person than me. I'm not doing that. A, because I cannot afford that giant toaster to strap to my head, and B, I don't want that close enough to me.
That's fair.
I'm getting VR. I am just sticking to like Beat Saber and VR chats. Like that's
both good. Both are good though.
Well, since we're still on the topic of horror games, what's your opinion on the past couple of years of the indie horror scene? Like going from Five Nights at Freddy's onwards. What's your opinion on the quality of those?
There's some great ones. I mean, like, I think, Five Nights at Freddy's is definitely a jump scare game, but it does its job really well at it. And it's like fun when you're engaged in it. I like a lot of the indie games because they're often they're smaller experiences. A lot of the AAA games, they have to, the companies they have to make a 20-hour experience, and it has to be, collectibles and fine stuff. A lot of indie horror games are 2-3 hours, and they scare am I allowed to swear? I don't know how this works.
Yeah.
I'll say crap because it seemed like you were slightly uncomfortable. Scare the crap out of you, and and you get in and get out. Like there's one indie horror experience I played that was basically just like 6 short moments when you're in like an abandoned house, and each moment lasts like a minute and a half as you're walking around the house trying to figure out what happened, and that's it. And it's so scary because it feels like it's not found footage, but it almost has that feeling of it, of like, I'm seeing something I'm not supposed to, and I'm not quite sure what it is.
Yeah, sort of like what was used for Blair Witch Project or Chronicle.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, moving on to things that aren't horror games, may or may not come back to a time permitting.
Sure.
So your bio says that you went to NYU. Did you always intend to be a television writer, or did you gradually figure that out as you went along?
I gradually figured that out as I went along. In high school, again, going back to the video game thing, I was like, I'm going to become a programmer. And I took programming classes, and I was bad at it. I was extraordinarily bad at programming. To the point where it was also like everyone also assumed that's what I'd do, because that's what I looked like in middle school and high school, where they're like, oh, you can't computer program? Are you sure? But I couldn't. I could not. And so I was like, okay, I like writing. And in my mind, I thought I would maybe get into book publishing, like I'd be an editor, or maybe in some distant dream world, I'd be like a novelist. I always liked comedy. I just, comedy always seemed like a job someone else does. Like professional basketball player. If you were like, do you want to be in the NBA? I'd be like, yeah, but doesn't someone else do that? You know what I mean? Like it was always out of reach. And I got to college, and luckily in New York, New York is a city where if you want to try to perform something, you actually can try it pretty reasonably. And my junior year, I was kind of, people had said I was funny, and I'd considered it, and I hit up an open mic. And from there, I started to build a career that eventually led to TV writing. So I never thought it. Until I started doing comedy, I did not think I would become a TV writer.
All right. Who are your comedy influences now?
I definitely, in general, things like The Onion and Clickhole are big comedy influences on me. I also like, I like some of the classics. I like, George Carlin, which feels cliche to say at this point. I really like Todd Barry. I really like Maria Bamford. Sarah Silverman was definitely early on in terms of like joke writing, just set up punch. Sarah Silverman's great for. It's hard to say, like a lot of different people. Like there's also like different influences. Like I like comedy that's about very sad things. I enjoy getting into sad topics. So weirdly, even someone like Shirley Jackson, with the way that she handled sad topics through horror, was, not an influence in terms of like one-to-one, but sort of like, oh, I want to be able to take that technique to express something sad through my medium.
If you can like take a sad event or an incredibly awful event and then somehow find the one thing that can make people smile in it, it kind of not makes it better, but whoever's doing the bad thing, it sort of takes away their power.
Yeah, and it's emotionally engaging. It's to me, it's more interesting to talk about the things that make us sad than like, comedy where it's like, I hate my wife or I hate my husband. Like to me, that's too surface level.
Yeah. It's kind of like what Mel Brooks said about why much of his comedy was making fun of Nazis, where he made the comedy about it not to make light of the event. He did it to take away their power.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So since you're writing for Samantha Bee's show, do you have a process for current events joke writing? Do you write solo or with a partner or in a group, or how do you write
Um,
them?
well, when I was a regular staff writer, the way we do it is the head writer at the time, Melinda Taub, who's amazing, she would create an outline, and it's usually like 8 points of like, just a bullet point outline. And then 3 or 4 writers would split that up, and we'd all go out on our own, write our own piece of it. And then Melinda's job was to put it back together. And then as a group, we would rewrite it together. We'd punch it up, we'd fact check it with the researchers. Since we've gone remote, Kristen Bartlett and I became head writers 3 weeks before the pandemic. So that was great. Always good when your first month on the job, there's an international pandemic. So what Kristen and I do now is we do the outlines, writers split it up. But because writing remote's a little harder, it's usually just us and another writer or 2 writers who are doing the script rewrite. So basically everyone breaks off, writes their own piece, and then as a team, we sort of combine them and make sure they're coherent, they make sense, no one repeated a joke, no one repeated info, and then we make the show.
So it's kind of like doing a divide and conquer, and then the exact opposite to make sure it actually works.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And since you mentioned the pandemic, how has it affected your ability to work over these past 10 years, as it feels like?
Well, I'm lucky in that I have nobody and I have nothing but work. So for me, it's not that bad because I live in an apartment with a lot of video games and a lot of time.
Yes.
But it's been okay. It's what's weird is what makes it hard isn't me personally. It's that, I have coworkers and I have friends who aren't handling it as well, whether they have kids and they're struggling with that, or, they're not as antisocial as I am. So the confinement is hard. So, sometimes like you have to help other people who might not be doing quite as well with it, try to like, keep going. And that is difficult during a pandemic and people are losing their mind.
Yeah, it's hard to get that connection back when your connection is entirely dependent on your ISP.
I mean, seriously though, yeah.
So back to the topic of like comedy writing as a whole, do you ever find yourself writing a joke that you just knew you can't get put on the air, but you needed to write it anyway?
All the time. Kristen and I do something called Monday jokes. And what Monday jokes are jokes that we know Sam is going to read on, she's going to read during the read through, and she will either laugh or hate them, but they're there to be cut. Like we definitely put in jokes that we just, because they're dumb and we know they won't go, but we like them. We're like, these will live in front of an audience of like 30 people and then we'll cut it.
So the end goal of that one is just to get her to say, guys, I can't put this in there.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
So actually, how did you get the Sam Bee gig in the first place?
She actually recruited me. I'd been doing late night writing for a little while. I'd written for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, which became The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, and I was there for both of those. I wrote on The President Show on Comedy Central, Adam Ruins Everything, a bunch of award shows, and I'm sort of slowing my roll now because it takes a lot of energy, but I was writing a ton of political jokes on Twitter, and Sam followed me years ago before she hired me, and as The President Show was ending, she heard that it was ending, and she went to my agents and managers and was like, hey, would he be interested in interviewing for this job? And I did, and because I wasn't a psychopath, they hired me. That's really most comedy show interviews. If you're getting to the interview, they just want to make sure you're not an asshole.
Because I was going to say, how often do they get psychopaths?
They do. That's the thing, though, is like, especially in a creative field, you'll be like, oh, this person's super funny. Then you'll meet them and be like, nope. Dudes who are very intense. There are some very intense dudes in comedy.
Yeah. It's a bit difficult to get into the comedy field without at least some degree of mental unhealthiness.
Yeah, exactly.
So also, you received the 2020 WGA Award for writing for comedy variety series. First, like, how does that feel, man?
It was unexpected. Our show is one of those shows that always feels like it's nominated but doesn't win, which is good. It's a cliche.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to win, but being nominated is always great. And we were very proud of that special, but we were also up against good competition. So we were at that award show kind of like, oh, it's our category, but whatever. And when they called our name, it was incredible. That's my first time ever winning sort of an award like that for television writing. It was honestly, it wasn't like the best moment of my life in some deep, I'll remember it on my deathbed way, but it was definitely a cool ass moment.
And second, I just have to ask about WGA, but for those listening on the Writers Guild.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have to like murder a hobo in the dead of winter in order to get into the Writers Guild, or did I just hear the process wrong?
You heard the process wrong. That was in the 80s. Now you have to. It's different depending on which arm of the guild you're kind of in. It's different if you're TV writing versus, because the guild also represents a lot of newsrooms, in terms of like print publications, online publications. So we have slightly different ways into the guild itself. For TV writing, I believe, first of all, you have to be on a guild show. And most TV shows now are guild, because if it's not a writers guild show, then other unions get weird. Once you have one thing that's not union, other unions get weird about it. So usually it's all union or not.
Is it anything like with the Screen Actors Guild, where it's like a catch-22 of you have to have a Screen Actors Guild membership in order to get into a SAG production, but you can't get into that, or you can't get anything into the Screen Actors Guild without being on a SAG production?
It's a lot easier than that. Now you have to it's almost like the Writers Guild. You're allowed to work on a Writers Guild show, but once you earn a certain amount, they sort of force you to join. And I think that amount goes up a little bit each year. I think the amount now is like 38,000 or 40,000 in a full year. So it doesn't have to be like, but it has to be from a WGA sanction. This is just TV. I don't know what newsrooms are, and I assume they're different. But for TV, and I also don't know what film is. Film might be the same rule money-wise, but I really don't know. For TV, you need to earn something like 38,000, 40,000. And then there's an entry fee of like, I think it's like 2,000 for the East and 4,000 for WJ West, but I could be very wrong about that. I know that West and East have slightly different entry fees.
Okay, like on 38K a year, that's pretty intense. Though, like with the actual rates, I guess it's kind of a low bar. Like, do you ever have problems with it, or?
No, but like, it's very possible to, like, if you're out of work for a while, or you only did like a 6-week show or something, that the math isn't there for that. It's not a super hard bar to reach, but it is a relatively hard bar. On the bright side, once you qualify, and you have to qualify every year with that amount. If you don't qualify, you're still a member, but you're sort of like, I forget the term, but you're not like a full-on member. But as long as you qualify for that 40 every year, you have health insurance. If you're in there a couple of years, you start to get a pension. So they do take care of you. Like, if I lost my job right now, I would have health insurance until 2021.
Damn.
Yeah.
I gotta get me some of that.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, on the flip side of the earlier question about writing a joke, but it can't get on the air. Did you ever write a joke that made it to air, but you immediately regretted having it made to air?
No, I mean, there's definitely jokes I've written that I didn't necessarily, I was like, I could have done better, but we were out of time, where something's like kind of corny or what have you. I think the closest example I can think of is Kristen, who again is the head writer now with me. She called Ivanka Trump the C word, and we almost got canceled. So I think that was regrettable, but it wasn't my joke. And every time someone asks me if it was my joke, I'm like, you assume it was my joke. That feels weird. But it was not my joke.
Okay, then. Bridget, take note. We're not allowed to call anyone the C word.
You're not allowed to do that. Apparently, people get very mad. We found out in 2018.
On TV.
Okay. Okay, so on YouTube we can't say
you can't even say
anything.
No.
YouTube gets testy about if you say the word "the." Apparently,
you're just gonna have to keep saying it to people's face
Uh,
when it's true.
well. So, in non-plague times, in the before times, since you work on a current events-based writing staff, what do you do to unwind after having to pay attention to all the awful all day long?
I mean, there's a couple things. There is always weed, which helps. I would love to lie and say something better than that. I've been trying, different relaxation things. I also try, I've been doing meditating, which always feels like cheesy to do, but also helps. So I always have that catch-22 in my head. So I've been meditating. I read a lot. I play it. I mean, obviously, as I've mentioned, I play a ton of video games. I work on other projects. But in all honesty, it's hard. It's hard to turn it off because, I'm still working remote, and it definitely at times feels like it's not like I'm working at home, but living at work. And so at times it's like very hard to be like, okay, I'm going to relax. Oh, a message just came in, especially now that I'm head writer on the show. There'll be a message at like 11 p.m. where I'm like, I have to drop everything and go do it. So it's been kind of hard to escape the stress.
Well, at the very least, your weed's legal in New York, so there's that.
It's still not. It's still not yet.
Wait,
but it's a lot. It's a lot easier than I'm sure Texas is. I'm sure Texas is a real rough gambit. New York, it's more like they're like, try not to.
It's like, okay, we're not gonna entirely get on you or lock you down about it. Just don't, please.
It's very like just don't let us see it. That's it. We're not gonna fight you on it. At least now it is. It used to be real bad.
Just like not in public, please.
Basically, yeah. Yeah, it's like college dorm rules where it's like if no one complains, it's fine.
Yeah, well, in Texas, you can't smell like patchouli without somebody somewhere being like, "Hey, wait a minute!
Wait a minute! That's illegal."
Mm-hmm. So since we got a bit more time, in terms of video games, what are you playing right now?
I am playing Dragon Quest XI on the Switch, and it is a delightful game. I got an Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5, and I have spent the vast majority of time on my Switch in the past month.
Also in that case, with that kind of salary, can you get me in touch with Samantha Bee? I feel like I need this extra cash influx.
No, that's the thing is I have friends who make what I make, but they have a family, and that's a mistake. When you have nothing, you can get anything.
What's the most recent horror game you've played?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously for the Silent Hill book, I played through that a ton of times. I played Silent Hill Shattered Memories recently, which is this spin-off game that came out for the Wii, PS2, and PSP, which is like, it was made by, I forget if it was an American team or a British team, but it was made by a Western team. It's a very different type of Silent Hill game, but it's one of my favorites in the series because it tries so many new things. Yeah.
Do you play any RPGs or tabletop games?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I have like, I was going to grab some, but I have like a ton of role-playing books on different shelves around here. I love tabletop RPGs. I was in a couple remote games for a while that wrapped up, but no, and like I'm playing Dragon Quest, which is an RPG obviously, but the last game I played actually played Tabletop Cyberpunk. Yeah. Nice. My friend ran a game like right before the video game came out, I think in conjunction with them. But it was like a 3-episode thing where they gave away the book.
Yeah, well, luckily the theater of the mind doesn't have as many glitches.
Yeah. Oh God, I know, man. I forgot I had pre-ordered that game, so when it showed up in my Xbox, I was like, oh yeah, you did that. What a weird game. What a weird game.
Yeah, like, at this point, I still honestly, I have no idea what the game's about. All I know is that it was hyped for a long time, and it was super buggy, and everybody was angry because, like, the situation where it's like, oh, why do you keep delaying it? Just release it. And then they're like, okay. They're like, why'd you release it so soon? It's all buggy. You should have delayed it.
I mean, like, honestly, after like, it feels like it's a Bethesda game, and both because of the bugs, but also in terms of like playing it, it feels like Skyrim or Fallout, 3 and up, because you're basically like, it's almost the exact same type of game. So weirdly, it feels less like Witcher 3 than it does like Fallout 3.
Oh.
Yeah, is right. I said something interesting.
Yeah, this okay.
I am useless as a human being.
Nah. At the very least, you make people happy.
That's true. I do.
So, what's the most disappointing game that you saw, you wanted it really bad? You're like, this is gonna be the best experience ever, and then when you played it, it was absolute garbage.
Well, I was married for 1 year, but that's so that wasn't great in terms of like things that like I didn't finish. But I'm trying to think. Usually when I'm disappointed by a game, I'm just sort of like, it's my fault. I tend to blame myself. I can't think of an honest example where I blame the game. Like okay, for example, Red Dead Redemption 2 I know is a good game. I respect why people love it, but about 5 or 6 hours into it, I was like, I don't like this. And I know it's because of me. So usually if I don't like a game, I know that it has some sort of quality behind it, but I have failed the game, not the other way around.
So wait. Self-hating for wanting better. Are you Jewish?
No, my dad's Jewish though, but my mom's Catholic, so I got the whole thing.
Are you sure you're not Jewish?
I'm sure, but I was also raised in South Florida, so a lot of Jewish around me. And again, Jewish family. So
to quote the Birdcage, where there's sand. All right, so just to wrap all this up, there's one question that we've been asking all the guests we've had this season. If you had a magic wand or a monkey's paw or some other magic item that would allow you to change 2 things about the world, what would you change?
I would definitely probably take away the coronavirus. I think that doing something else would have been terrible. So definitely coronavirus. And then what else would I change with the last wish? That's a tough question because a lot of people need help in this world. And I do miss the store Toys R Us. So I would probably reopen the store Toys R Us. Like world hunger is bad, but there's also no Toys R Us anymore.
Yeah, it's like, where else are we supposed to see all sorts of empty shelf space?
Yeah. Where are you going to see 30 copies of Connect 4?
Or them still trying to sell the last Wii's they had alongside the Quest Connect.
It's a great time.
Or like not just for Toys R Us, but then like for other places that phase them out. Those demo stations. I miss those.
The little like dog that would bark and then like hop a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. The dancing plant.
Yeah.
No.
Well, that one. Nah. But
no.
But like side note, if nobody knew, is there anything selfish that you'd wish for yourself other than Toys R Us?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I weirdly, as self-deprecating as I am, I have a pretty good life, and I feel like I don't need the wish. I mean, I guess I would wish that I could keep working. Like after whenever this job ends, I will get another job. But in terms of my life right now, I think I'm lucky enough where I wouldn't waste a wish on me.
Self-deprecation, guilt, and fairly contented. Listen, are you sure you're not Jewish?
I'm sure. I'm sure it's confirmed in everything. Confirmed in the Universal Catholic Church.
Oh. Okay, that's a bit harsh.
I'm not religious anymore, but that's what happened.
Catholicism will do that to you.
Catholicism in 2020 will definitely do that to you.
Yep.
Just like, why, God, why? And then the only response being, I don't know, man.
I don't know.
I think it's probably a good place to wrap it up. Mike Drucker, everybody. We'll be right back.